Wait, he what? He lowered his cholesterol with Oreo cookies? This is insane. A recent case study by PhD scientist and Harvard medical student Nicholas Norwitz showed that Oreo cookies were more effective at lowering his LDL cholesterol than a high-intensity statin treatment. How effective were they? During the study, eating Oreos lowered his LDL cholesterol by 71%, compared to a decrease of 32.5% when he was on the statin therapy. No, this study isn't saying that everyone worried about high cholesterol should go out and buy cookies made with refined carbohydrates. But what can we actually learn from this incredibly small study, and is it worth paying attention to? Before we start, I'm just a normal person trying to learn more about stuff. Nothing in this video is advice of any kind. We'll briefly review the details of the study in this video. Make sure to stay until the end for some criticisms of the study so far, including some thoughts about Norwitz's recent interview with Walter Willett, professor of epidemiology and nutrition at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And if his name rings any bells, it's because Willett was one of the main authors who put out the observational study that linked red meat with type 2 diabetes, which I covered in a previous video linked in the description. As Norwitz points out, this is an N of 1 study, which means there's only one person in this study, him. And the purpose is to draw attention to the phenomenon of the lean mass hyperresponder, a type of person who is on a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet and exhibits very high LDL cholesterol, high HDL cholesterol, and low triglycerides, which are basically fat particles in the blood. He chose to treat his high LDL with Oreos and compare it to a high-dose statin regimen in order to force conversation around lean mass hyperresponders, LDL cholesterol's role in the body, and the lipid energy hypothesis. He also made sure the study was ethical and also consulted his physician and a cardiologist during the study. The study consisted of a 16-day period in which Norwitz added 12 Oreos a day to his low-carb ketogenic diet. His LDL cholesterol was measured periodically before a 3-month washout period in which his LDL levels, BMI, and other metrics could return to normal, followed by a 6-week treatment of 20 milligrams of rosuvastatin per day. Rosuvastatin is considered a high-intensity statin therapy and takes 6 weeks or so for patients to get the full LDL lowering effect of the drug, which is why that arm of the study was 6 weeks. The Oreo arm of the study was originally supposed to be 14 days, but when Norwitz and his cardiologist saw the huge drop in LDL, they wanted a couple more days of data to see if the downward trend continued. Spoiler alert, it did continue to drop. What's more surprising than the fact that the Oreos lowered Norwitz's LDL dramatically more than the 6 weeks of statin therapy is the speed in which his LDL levels lowered on the Oreos. Norwitz's LDL level dropped 32.5% on the statin after 4 weeks of taking rosuvastatin, but it decreased from 384 milligrams per deciliter to 111 milligrams per deciliter in only 16 days of the Oreos, indicating that some people's bodies might be able to rapidly change when presented with different sources of energy, like adding carbohydrates to a ketogenic diet. Norwitz has stated in other videos that he chose Oreos basically for internet clout. He stated that adding any carbohydrate would have had similar effects, so sweet potatoes, apples, anything. He chose Oreos because it's more provocative, and it's a food that pretty much everybody knows. That being said, I think it's obvious that we shouldn't think of Oreos as a health food, and probably no one really should be eating highly processed food or refined grains on a daily basis anyway. Norwitz has said repeatedly in interviews that this study is a metabolic demonstration and not a health intervention. And his main question is, how do we make sense out of this? How do we make sense that a junk food in this case lowered his LDL cholesterol more and faster than a high-intensity statin treatment? One of the possible reasons why Oreos were so effective at lowering Norwitz's LDL is because he was already fat adapted. This means that his ketogenic diet allowed his body to get used to running off of primarily fats instead of carbohydrates. The results might be vastly different for someone who isn't already fat adapted. And the possible reason why Norwitz and other lean mass hyperresponders exhibit high cholesterol to begin with is known as the lipid energy hypothesis, or lipid energy model. In a tiny, uneducated nutshell, essentially when a lean mass hyperresponder is on a low-carb keto diet, the glycogen stores in the body are depleted. Glycogen is derived from carbs and is involved with glucose or sugar levels in the blood. The theory is that without the glycogen, the liver produces more cholesterol molecules to transport energy throughout the body. And so, these lean, metabolically healthy individuals have higher than normal LDL and HDL levels. By adding 100 grams of carbs, in Norwitz's case, Oreos, the LDL level dropped to a normal value that most cardiologists would say is pretty safe. You're probably wondering, if a keto diet can send your LDL levels through the roof, why would anyone go on one to begin with? In Norwitz's case, he said that he initially started a keto diet due to inflammatory bowel disease, and for him, it's the only thing that helped his condition. So one of the main points is that lean mass hyperresponders are otherwise incredibly fit and metabolically healthy other than their high LDL levels. So the question becomes more about risk. If Norwitz is healthy, fit, and lean on a keto diet, but his LDL levels are high, is it big enough a risk for him that he should sacrifice some of his metabolic function and risk his inflammatory bowel disease getting worse in order to lower his LDL levels? It's worth more conversation for sure. But there are of course some problems with his study that we need to at least think about as well. First off, as we previously stated, it's a case study. There's only one person in it. Even though Norwitz and Dave Feldman, fellow lean mass hyperresponder and author of related studies, said that the results of this experiment were expected in terms of carbs lowering LDL levels, larger studies with more participants need to be conducted to confirm this, or to disprove it. Second, as others have pointed out, the study itself is inherently biased. But honestly, the more studies that I read and the more that I learn, studies are always funded by people or companies, and people and companies all have biases. This is just another reason why more, larger studies need to be conducted. Another criticism is that this is, on its face, a challenge to the conventional thought surrounding LDL as the quote-unquote bad cholesterol, which might not actually be a negative thing because LDL does have important functions in the body or else the liver wouldn't produce it. This study serves to highlight the fact that there are nuances in this theory, and at least for some people, it's possible that higher LDL levels might not necessarily be the main driver of heart disease or atherosclerosis. Now, there's one more thing that I'd like to talk about, and it's Nicholas Norwitz's interview with Walter Willett. If you're thinking about watching it, I'll do a quick summary for you. It was mostly just Norwitz talking about the lean mass hyperresponders and all of the information that we've covered in this video so far in terms of the Oreo experiment. Willett really only said a handful of sentences. The only real important thing that he said was that media has a habit of going against the science and then putting a disclaimer at the end of an article. And then he also said that some media outlets try to say that obesity isn't a health issue, but there is significant evidence showing that obesity is a driver of several different diseases. So it's really important stuff, but as I watched the interview, I was like, oh shit. He put out the recent paper on how red meat consumption is linked with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, which I actually made a video about that's linked in the description. So save yourself the disappointment and don't bother watching the interview. Walter Willett doesn't say much at all about the Oreo study or about the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype. Norwitz's interviews with Metabolic Mind or Dr. Ken Berry or David Feldman's interview with Dr. William Cromwell are much more informative, and I'll link those below as well, just in case you want to check them out. They're longer, but they're totally worth it. It's possible that Norwitz's interview with Walter Willett was part of a longer dialogue, but it wasn't really made clear, so I'm not sure. There's a lot of information to digest in terms of the topic of LDL and the lean mass hyperresponder. The conversation surrounding it is incredibly interesting, and seeing responses from doctors, researchers, and other lean mass hyperresponders is showing that there's still a lot out there that we do not even know yet. But that's the point of science, to test hypotheses and to realize that solving one problem generates more questions and more problems to solve. I also think the lean mass hyperresponder questions are a good reminder that it's okay for us to be in the middle about topics relating to science, nutrition, health, or politics. This stuff gets so divisive and binary. The word tribe is thrown around so much these days, and I think it's perfectly human to be somewhere in the middle. But what do you think? Is the Oreo experiment actually garbage? Should we ignore it completely, or should further studies be done to see what's going on with this phenomenon? If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, please share it with a friend, share your thoughts in the comments, or give it a like. And if you like this kind of content, we'd love to have you as a subscriber. Thank you so much for watching, and I always want to give a shout out to everyone that reaches out via the comments or email. It means so much and makes it worth putting out all these videos. Thanks again. Take care.